The golden dragon claws collided heavily with the eerie ghost seal, and in the instant of impact, an expression of disbelief and horror flashed in the Ghost Emperor's eyes. Immortal grade power. The Ghost Emperor was struck speechless, for in this clash, he distinctly sensed that the power behind Mu Chen's punch transcended the spirit grade level and contained the true strength of immortal grade. Though Mu Chen had been able to contend with immortal grade power before when summoning the battle intent dragon, that was still a force originating from his battle will, not from himself. Thus, Mu Chen had remained at the mid-spirit grade. But at this moment, Mu Chen's punch was imbued with genuine immortal grade power. This left the Ghost Emperor utterly astounded, for in his perception, Mu Chen was still only at the mid-spirit grade. Yet for some unknown reason, the power radiating from his right arm had already reached the level of immortal grade. Boom. However, there was no time for further contemplation, as in that moment of collision, a resounding dragon's roar filled the air, followed by a torrent of overwhelming force sweeping through, crashing forward like a mighty wave. In the blink of an eye, the ghost seal cracked and shattered. The Ghost Emperor's expression changed drastically. Even with Mu Chen still at mid-spirit grade, he had already proven difficult to deal with. Now that he had reached the level of immortal grade, they were no longer on the same plane. Without hesitation, the Ghost Emperor pulled back swiftly, his hand forming a different seal. The ghost seal exploded with a thunderous boom, sending out an endless chill that surged toward Mu Chen like the bite of 1,000 ghosts. Roar! Yet as the freezing cold air enveloped Mu Chen, a brilliant golden light erupted, accompanied by a dragon's roar, sweeping across. Every trace of the icy energy that came into contact with it was instantly melted away. Whoosh! Mu Chen's phoenix wings fluttered behind him, and his form appeared like a ghost before the retreating Ghost Emperor. He swung his golden dragon fist once more, shattering the air in front of him. The dragon fist tore through the space and struck the Ghost Emperor's chest in a direct hit. Boom! A deep, resonant sound rang out, followed by the Ghost Emperor's shrill, agonizing scream. The golden light burst from his chest, obliterating all of his defenses. Even his immortal grade heavenly supreme body could not withstand the force of this punch, as half of his body was crushed to pieces. Blood poured from him like a torrential rain. The Ghost Emperor's body, like a bird with broken wings, plummeted from the sky and crashed heavily onto the white jade plaza. The earth trembled, and the shockwave visibly rippled through the ground, utterly destroying the specially constructed plaza. The entire world fell silent in the wake of this tremendous sound. Surrounding the plaza, countless powerful individuals and forces looked on with pale faces, their gazes inevitably turning to the young figure in the sky. A deep sense of awe surged from their hearts. So powerful, many of the strong exhaled with mixed expressions. Even with their rebellious nature, they were completely subdued by that terrifying force. One man, alone, had faced off against 5 immortal grade heavenly supremes and emerged victorious. Such an extraordinary feat would undoubtedly shock even the most powerful figures in the great thousand worlds. At this moment, they all understood clearly that with such a figure appearing on Tianluo continent, no one would ever be able to challenge the position of Mu Chen and Mu Manor again. From today onward, Mu Manor would unquestionably become the supreme ruler of Tianluo continent. And all of this was because Mu Manor had such a terrifying mansion lord. As the overwhelming battle intent dispersed from the sky, more than 10,000 mystic dragon soldiers flowed into the ring on Mu Chen's finger, their ethereal forms vanishing. His phoenix wings slowly retracted into his body, and Mu Chen lowered his head. His dark, calm eyes swept over the top forces. From today onward, Mu Manor shall dominate Tianluo continent. All forces must bow to Mu Manor. Those unwilling may leave Tianluo. Mu Chen's voice echoed across the heavens. Though his tone was calm, it contained an undeniable strength and dominance. For Mu Chen knew that, at this point, Mu Manor no longer needed to conceal its power. What he needed to do now was to claim Tianluo continent as his own. Only with this mighty continent as a foundation could Mu Manor rapidly expand and rise to become one of the top powers in the great thousand worlds. Around the square, there was some commotion stirred by Mu Chen's voice. The top forces from all directions showed complex expressions. They had once been invincible on the Tianluo continent, with no one to challenge them. However, from this moment on, they now had someone above them, a higher existence. Yet, no one dared show any doubt. Only the 5 qualified individuals had previously been defeated by Mu Chen's hands. After a brief moment of silence, the countless top-tier powerhouses and forces surrounding the square all bowed and clasped their fists. Their respectful voices echoed throughout the entire Tianluo city. We, the undersigned, pay our respects to the Mansion Lord. The 9 Nether, Mandala clan, and others gazed at the scene, unable to suppress their surging emotions. The other Xun'er experts displayed even more excitement, and pride began to flicker in their eyes. Indeed, under the leadership of their Mansion Lord, Xun'er would one day rise to prominence in the Great Thousand Worlds. In the sky, Mu Chen calmly nodded his head, then turned his gaze downwards, looking at the 5 massive craters on the White Jade Plaza. He spoke in a soft voice, "Stop hiding. An immortal grade Heavenly Supreme isn't so easily killed." As Mu Chen's words fell, spiritual light appeared within the 5 craters, and 5 battered figures slowly rose. It was the Ghost Emperor, Dan Yang Patriarch, and the other 3. At this moment, their spiritual energy was depleted, their bodies covered in blood, clearly suffering from extremely severe injuries. The 5 of them looked at Mu Chen, their expressions grim, with a trace of fear in their eyes. Even the ruthless Ghost Emperor showed immense caution and silence. The previous battle had shattered their fighting spirit. "Mu Chen, today you have won. From now on, we will no longer interfere with the Tianluo continent," said Violet Thunder Venerable, his face pale and voice hoarse. Mu Chen smiled faintly and said, "If you want a medal, just go ahead. If you stretch out a hand, I'll chop it off." At Mu Chen's unceremonious words, the 5 could only seethe with frustration but remained silent. The defeated had no face to speak. "Now, tell me the terms of your defeat," Mu Chen said casually. The Ghost Emperor's face darkened. "What do you want?" Mu Chen's gaze turned cold. "If I let you all leave unscathed, will others think they can come challenge me whenever they like? Do you really think I have no temper?" Violet Thunder Venerable gritted his teeth and said, "Don't go too far. Even though you've won, we're not so easily bullied. If you push us too hard, we'll self-destruct today and take you with us." Mu Chen chuckled lightly. "If you had the courage for that, you wouldn't have ended up in this situation. The 5 immortal grade Heavenly Supremes might be dangerous if they self-destructed, but anyone who reached the Heavenly Supreme level valued their lives too much." Mu Chen didn't believe they had the guts for such an act. The Ghost Emperor and the others' faces darkened, but they eventually softened and asked, "Then what do you want?" "Simple. Each of you will compensate Xun'er with 100 billion Supreme Spiritual Liquid," Mu Chen said calmly. Xun'er would soon dominate the Tianluo continent, and such a vast amount of Supreme Spiritual Liquid would be essential for the upcoming consolidation. "What?" The faces of the Ghost Emperor and the others twitched. 100 billion Supreme Spiritual Liquid was no small sum, even with their financial strength. It would take nearly 10 years for their numerous forces to accumulate that amount. After all, despite their large domains, their consumption was equally terrifying. Just like Xun'er, which had more than $1 billion in annual income, but could only retain a fraction of it. The Ghost Emperor's face turned ashen. "Mansion Lord, don't joke. If we withdraw 100 billion Supreme Spiritual Liquid, our forces will have to disband. Without Supreme Spiritual Liquid, the essential resource for cultivation, even immortal-grade Heavenly Supremes couldn't keep their forces together." "Then 50 billion it is," Mu Chen said with a smile, his expression turning cold. "If that's still not possible, then you can self-destruct." The 5 of them froze, clearly enraged. "Ghost Emperor doesn't need to give 50 billion. Mu Chen's next words made the Ghost Emperor's heart lift. Could it be that Mu Chen was afraid of his immortal-grade mid-level strength and didn't want to press too hard? "Just hand over your ancient divine convergence mirror," Mu Chen added. Those words sent a chill through the Ghost Emperor's entire body. His face twisted in disbelief. "You." The Ghost Emperor was enraged. Such a top-tier peerless sacred artifact was worth far more than 50 billion Supreme Spiritual Liquid. "If you don't want to, then I'll take it myself." Mu Chen's eyes were as sharp as a blade, and once again, spiritual energy surged around him. The Ghost Emperor's expression shifted between anger and calm. However, he was a seasoned leader, and in the end, his rationality suppressed his fury. With a dark expression, he flicked his sleeve, and a grayish-white light shot out. Mu Chen caught it in his palm, and as he looked at the bone mirror that appeared in his hand, he nodded in satisfaction. The other 4 people, seeing the Ghost Emperor's submissive attitude, also gave up their resistance. With a flick of their sleeves, they threw out 3 Qian Kuan bracelets, from which a vast spiritual energy subtly radiated. Mu Chen casually caught them, inspected them briefly, and nodded. His gaze then shifted to the last person, Dan Yang Patriarch. At this moment, the latter's face was slightly bitter. His faction had recently undergone significant changes, which consumed a considerable amount of supreme spiritual liquid, so coming up with 50 billion was difficult for him at the moment. Mu Chen observed Dan Yang Patriarch, who seemed unresponsive, and his expression grew slightly colder. Sensing Mu Chen's sharp gaze, Dan Yang Patriarch could only brace himself and ask, I wonder if some rare heavenly treasures could substitute for the 50 billion supreme spiritual liquid? What items? Mu Chen asked, showing little interest. Dan Yang Patriarch hesitated for a moment and cautiously suggested, I once obtained the remains of an ancient mandala flower, which in its prime was a heavenly supreme of immortal grade. As he spoke, his eyes were more focused on the mandala, clearly aware of her identity. Just as he had expected, when his words fell, a flicker of excitement appeared in the golden eyes of the mandala. She had reached the peak of Earth Supreme, and if she could obtain the remains of an immortal grade heavenly supreme mandala flower, she could use it to break through her current stagnation and ascend to heavenly supreme. However, the ancient mandala flower was extremely rare, and she had not heard of any news of it in recent years. To her surprise, Dan Yang Patriarch actually possessed one. Still, Dan Yang Patriarch hesitated because the remains of the ancient mandala flower were somewhat damaged, and in terms of value, it was worth no more than 10 billion supreme spiritual liquid. But what he did not expect was that as soon as his words fell, Mu Chen's cold gaze immediately dissipated, replaced by a gentle smile. He waved his hand and said, let this be the equivalent of the 50 billion. Mu Chen certainly knew that the remains weren't worth 50 billion, but in his view, allowing mandala to break through was worth the difference. After all, back in the Great Luo Heaven domain, mandala had helped him a lot, even assisting in the establishment of Mu Manor. Now that he could help her break through, Mu Chen was naturally willing to do so without hesitation. Dan Yang Patriarch was caught off guard by Mu Chen's decisiveness. His heart lightened, and he flicked his finger, sending a jade vial towards Mu Chen. Inside the vial was a spiritual liquid, within which was a flower no bigger than the size of a palm, radiating a faint, unusual energy. It really is the remains of the ancient mandala flower. Mu Chen glanced at it, and then flicked his sleeve, sending the vial flying toward mandala. She hurriedly caught it, her small hand gently touching the vial. Her gaze towards Mu Chen now carried a hint of warmth. All right, the debt is settled. You can leave now. Mu Chen clapped his hands and smiled faintly at the Ghost Emperor and his group. The 5 of them, all feeling frustrated, exchanged looks and sighed silently. Embarrassed to prolong their humiliation, they vanished into the sky in a streak of light. As the 5 left, on a tower far in the distance in Tian Luo City, a man in a black and white robe watched the scene coldly. If Mu Chen had seen him, he would have immediately recognized him as Mo Yu, whom he had encountered before in the Futu ancient clan. Useless fools. Mo Yu shouted angrily as he punched the wall. The thick wall, as tough as steel, cracked into numerous fissures. A cold glint flickered in his eyes. The Ghost Emperor and his group had been trying to deal with Mu Chen, and he had secretly been orchestrating everything. To aid them, he had even given the Ghost Emperor a peerless sacred artifact. But despite all this, the fools had still failed, and the sacred artifact had ended up in Mu Chen's hands. No wonder he was so furious. At the same time, Mu Chen, standing in White Jade Plaza in the distance, felt a shift in the air. His hawk-like gaze pierced through the space, locking onto Mo Yu from afar. So it was you behind this. Mu Chen's eyes turned cold in an instant. Ma Yu also sensed Mu Chen's gaze, and immediately, a terrifying surge of spiritual energy erupted around him. My lord, do you want us to strike and heavily injure him? 2 shadowy figures appeared behind Ma Yu, their voices cold and devoid of emotion. Ma Yu's eyes flickered, but then the spiritual energy surrounding him quickly calmed down. He shook his head and coldly said, if we act, it might draw the attention of Qing Yanjing. Forget it. Let's not deal with him for now. The plan to target him is simply a precaution within the clan. Though this brat has some ability, he doesn't pose much of a threat in my eyes. As long as he dares to come to the Eternal Assembly, I'll find the opportunity to cripple him. In that place, life and death are at the discretion of the participants, even Qing Yanjing can't interfere. Upon hearing Ma Yu's words, the 2 shadowy figures quietly dispersed. Ma Yu's gaze locked onto Mu Chen from afar. Their eyes met in midair, both filled with a chilling intent. Mahayu slowly extended his hand and clenched it tightly, a sinister smile appearing on his face. At the same time, a cold, frosty voice echoed into Mu Chen's ears. I'll let you continue to struggle for a while. Once you dare to come to the Eternal Assembly, I'll cripple you. With a sinister grin, Mahayu's figure gradually began to fade, and within moments, he completely disappeared. Mu Chen remained expressionless, watching the vanishing Mahayu. His fingers slowly curled into a fist. Mahayu. Don't worry. That eternal undying body, I'll make it mine. The battle in Tianluo City came to a close, and unsurprisingly, it sent shockwaves throughout the entire Tianluo continent. All the forces understood that, after this battle, Mu Manor would undoubtedly become the strongest force on Tianluo continent. With Mu Chen as the mighty mansion lord, Mu Manor now had the qualification and power to dominate the continent. From now on, no one would be able to challenge Mu Manor's position. Thus, after the battle, leaders of the top forces across Tianluo continent rushed toward Mu Manor's headquarters, clearly intending to submit and ensure that when Mu Manor solidified its rule, they could maximize their own interests. After all, Tianluo continent was vast, and Mu Manor's forces couldn't possibly control every corner. Many areas still required these original forces to maintain stability. At the headquarters of Mu Manor, the ancient heavenly palace, the rushing heavenly river howled as Mu Chen sat cross-legged on a nearby mountain peak. His gaze swept toward a distant mountain, where powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy were subtly emanating. That mountain was where Mandala had entered seclusion after obtaining the remains of the ancient Mandala flower. She had chosen this moment to break through and pursue the long-sought heavenly supreme realm. Whoosh! A sharp sound cut through the air, and the delicate figure of Nine Nether appeared beside Mu Chen. She wore black, serpent-scale-like clothes and pants that accentuated her alluring curves, exuding both sensuality and an air of competence. How has Mu Manor been lately? Mu Chen turned his head and smiled at Nine Nether. Upon hearing this, Nine Nether gave him a disdainful look. Lately, the affairs of Mu Manor had been incredibly busy. Mandala was in seclusion, and Mu Chen had been hiding in the heavenly palace, leaving all the responsibilities on her shoulders. Recently, all the top forces from Tianluo continent have come to visit Mu Manor. But as for how to handle them, we'll have to wait for Mandala to come out of seclusion and decide, Nine Nether said. Mu Chen had no objections to this. Dealing with these forces was a complicated matter. If they were too lenient, it could weaken Mu Manor's dominance over Tianluo continent. These matters were best left for Mandala and the others to worry about. Also, the number of powerful individuals coming to join Mu Manor has been increasing, and their quality is quite good. Currently, there are 6 Earth Supreme experts undergoing evaluation. Such experts were considered the backbone of any superpower. If any of them were to break through to the Heavenly Supreme Realm, they would greatly enhance the strength of the manor. Make sure to evaluate them thoroughly. Investigate their backgrounds, Mu Chen mused. Although such high-level experts were important, it was necessary to ensure their loyalty. There were plenty of people in this world who would resort to any means for cultivation resources. Nine Nether nodded in agreement. The next 5 months will be a time for my closed-door cultivation. The matters of Mu Manor will have to be entrusted to you, Mu Chen said apologetically. He had taken Nine Nether from the Nine Nether clan, only to end up using her as labor. Nine Nether pouted helplessly, but she knew that aside from Mu Chen, she was the only one capable of maintaining order in Mu Manor. She was also well aware of Mu Chen's purpose for secluding himself. He was preparing for the eternal assembly of the Mode ancient clan that would take place in 5 months. This was extremely important for Mu Chen. His cultivation over the years had been aimed at achieving the eternal undying body. Having surpassed the great sun indestructible body and the immortal golden body, only one final step remained before he could fulfill his wish and attain the legendary eternal undying body. Thus, Mu Chen was seizing every moment, striving to improve his strength. He knew well that those who could cultivate the immortal golden body were among the top figures in the great thousand worlds. To stand out among so many outstanding individuals and gain the recognition of the eternal undying body was no easy task. Rest assured and focus on your cultivation, Mu Chen. I will handle the matters of Mu Manor, Nine Nether said, giving a small nod. Mu Chen was the core of Mu Manor, and as long as he was strong enough, the manor would stand firm on Tianluo continent. Mu Chen nodded and took out 3 Qianquan bracelets. He handed one to Nine Nether, saying, "This contains 50 billion supreme spiritual liquid. It should be enough for the development of Mu Manor during this period." This 50 billion supreme spiritual liquid had naturally been extorted from the Ghost Emperor and his companions. As for the remaining 100 billion, it was needed for Mu Chen's seclusion, as he intended to attempt breaking through to the late spirit grade during these 5 months. This would require a vast amount of supreme spiritual liquid, or else even with his talent, he would be unable to make progress without the necessary resources. 9 Nether took the bracelet. Mu Manor was rapidly growing, and supreme spiritual liquid was an indispensable resource. After exchanging a few more words, 9 Nether left, as Mu Manor always required someone to handle its many affairs. Mu Chen's gaze lingered on the figure of 9 Nether as she departed before shifting toward the flowing river of spiritual energy in the distance. On the platforms surrounding the river, numerous young figures were engaged in cultivation. A beam of light descended from the sky, seemingly enveloping a young figure. This was followed by many exclamations, as the figure vanished along the beam of light amidst the envious gazes of the crowd. Clearly, someone with impressive talent had been selected by the scripture pavilion of the ancient heavenly palace, which was a rare opportunity for Mu Manor's disciples who were cultivating there. Mu Chen smiled faintly at this vibrant scene. Mu Manor had indeed become increasingly powerful, and these young disciples would soon form the backbone of the manor in the future. Yet, Mu Chen couldn't help but feel a bit dazed and emotional. Unknowingly, the Mu Manor he had founded had reached such heights. The young man who had once walked out of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy was now the overlord of Tian Luo continent. Mu Chen lowered his head, a light smile on his face. He calmed his emotions and, with a slight movement, transformed into a streak of spiritual light that descended into the body of a great mountain beneath him. The mountain had been hollowed out to create a massive cavernous cultivation chamber. He sat cross-legged on a stone bed, flicking his fingers over 2 Qian Kuan bracelets in front of him, producing a crisp sound. The bracelets trembled, and an endless stream of supreme spiritual liquid poured out, swirling like a gigantic dragon in the vast cavern. Spirit runes appeared on the stone walls of the cavern, faintly forming several spiritual arrays. These were the spirit gathering arrays and spirit condensing arrays, designed to concentrate and compress spiritual energy. As the supreme spiritual liquid flowed like a river, it was further refined by these arrays, and within the flow, shimmering crystal dust could be seen, flickering like stars. 100 billion supreme spiritual liquid was an enormous amount. If a normal spirit grade heavenly supreme were to refine and absorb it, it would take at least several years. So, Mu Chen had made extensive preparations to accelerate the process. Of course, this was not enough. Mu Chen formed a seal with one hand, and a beam of spiritual light rose from the top of his head. Slowly, a crystal-like floating pagoda appeared, hovering just a few inches above him. Mu Chen aimed to refine and absorb 10 billion drops of supreme spiritual liquid within just 5 short months. The key to this seemingly impossible feat lay in his possession of the sacred floating pagoda. By harnessing its refining power, Mu Chen could maximize his efficiency to the fullest. With all preparations complete, Mu Chen slowly closed his eyes. His breath faded into stillness, resembling an old monk entering deep meditation. Whoosh, whoosh. In the vast cavern, a faint wind seemed to stir. Torrents formed from supreme spiritual liquid surged into motion, eventually streaming unceasingly into the crystal pagoda. The pagoda began to emit a sacred radiance. Like a bottomless pit, it absorbed the overwhelming torrent without the slightest sign of overflow. At the same time, a brilliant light burst from the base of the pagoda. From within that radiance, crystal dust as fine as motes of dust began to drift downward. Each speck was too small to be seen with the naked eye, yet every particle was condensed from pure, refined spiritual energy. As the crystal dust fell, it landed on Mu Chen's skin and immediately melted into it like water absorbed by a sponge. Inside his body, blood surged and boiled. His flesh quivered, bones rumbled, and he swiftly absorbed the crystal dust that had merged with him. The cavern echoed with howling winds as more and more crystal dust ascended. Mu Chen's fair skin began to emit a faint glow, as if his entire body had transformed into a radiant gemstone, brilliant and dazzling. Over the following months, Mu Chen remained in seclusion, completely shutting out the outside world. However, while Mu Chen trained in isolation, the Great Thousand Worlds began to stir with growing excitement. The cause of this fervor was the upcoming Eternal Assembly, hosted by the Moth Ancient Clan. Unlike the clan-wide bloodline tournament of the Futu Ancient Clan, the Eternal Assembly drew the eyes of the entire Great Thousand Worlds. Its purpose was to choose a worthy master for the Eternal Undying Body. The Eternal Undying Body, one of the 5 primordial law bodies in the Great Thousand Worlds, was ranked 4th on the Supreme Dharma Form ranking. Yet everyone knew that among the 5, there was no real hierarchy. Each possessed unique powers, and in truth, they were all considered to be tied for first place. Still, the eternal undying body held a particularly fearsome reputation, for it had once been cultivated by the strongest figure of the ancient era, the immortal emperor himself. Its power needed no further proof. Supreme Dharma forms of this level were coveted even by saint-grade heavenly supremes, let alone ordinary heavenly supremes. However, the Eternal Assembly had strict rules. Only those who had successfully cultivated the immortal golden body were qualified to participate, and each person had only one chance in their lifetime. Though the requirements were stringent, they didn't diminish the grandeur of the Eternal Assembly. After all, everyone wanted to know who would ultimately claim the legendary eternal undying body. And so, as the date of the Eternal Assembly approached, the eyes of the entire Great Thousand Worlds turned toward the Mode Ancient clan. Time passed swiftly. In the blink of an eye, over 4 months had gone by. Now, only 10 days remained before the Eternal Assembly would begin. At that moment, within the vast cavern, 2 floating Chen Kuan bracelets suddenly dropped to the ground, their spiritual light extinguished, clearly indicating that the supreme spiritual liquid within had been fully consumed. Clink. The crisp sound of the bracelets striking the stone floor echoed through the cavern. At the same time, Chen, lying on a greenstone bed, stirred. His tightly shut eyes slowly opened. In the instant Chen opened his eyes, 2 dazzling beams of spiritual light shot out, piercing through the mountain and into the skies beyond. Powerful waves of spiritual energy fluctuation surged through the cavern like a tidal wave, causing the entire structure to tremble violently, as though on the verge of collapse. The tremors lasted for some time before gradually fading. The radiance in Chen's eyes dimmed and calm returned. Yet his deep black eyes now carried an even greater depth. He looked at the 2 Chen Kuan bracelets lying on the ground and shook his head helplessly. Despite his efforts, he had failed to break through to the late spirit grade during this seclusion. To absorb 10 billion drops of supreme spiritual liquid in just 4 months, even with all his preparation and the aid of the sacred floating pagoda, had proven a task too great. Fortunately, the pure spiritual energy transformed from the 100 billion supreme spiritual liquid had been fully refined and absorbed into his body. At this moment, boundless and overwhelming spiritual power was constantly surging within Chen's flesh and blood, gradually merging with his body. Once this spiritual energy fully integrates with his flesh, bones, and blood, it would mark the day of his breakthrough to the late spirit grade. It should be soon, Chen murmured, sensing that this process wouldn't take much longer. However, he had no time to continue his closed-door cultivation, as the Eternal Assembly was about to begin, and he absolutely couldn't afford to miss it. I'll focus on cultivation while heading to the Mode Ancient clan, Chen reassured himself. He then moved swiftly, appearing atop a mountain peak. There, he saw 2 figures approaching from the distance. One was, as expected, the slender and curvaceous Xun'er, her figure a perfect silhouette. The other, to his surprise, was a girl in a purple dress. Her dark hair cascaded down to her delicate hips, fluttering in the wind. Her exquisitely beautiful face glowed faintly, but her expression was icy and stern. Her golden eyes shimmered with a mysterious, profound light. Mandala. Chen couldn't help but be startled when he saw the purple-dressed girl. In the past, Mandala had always appeared as a young girl, but now she had transformed into a graceful young woman. The overwhelming spiritual energy emanating from her clearly indicated that she had successfully broken through to Heavenly Supreme. Mandala glanced at Chen with her golden eyes and said indifferently, "Our Mandala clan has a slow growth cycle. This breakthrough to Heavenly Supreme has allowed me to leave my juvenile phase behind." Chen nodded, holding back a laugh. "That's for the best. Otherwise, others might think our Manor is being led by a little girl. Do you look down on my previous form?" Mandala narrowed her golden eyes and asked coldly. No, Chen quickly replied. Now that Manor was dealing with numerous complicated matters, and with his impending departure, the last thing he needed was to upset Mandala and risk her quitting. If that happened, Manor would fall into chaos. Mandala snorted, giving Chen a dismissive glare. Lately, all the attention in the Great Thousand Worlds has been focused on the Mode Ancient clan, Xun'er remarked. Chen's expression grew slightly more serious as he nodded. After all, it concerns the eternal undying body. It's naturally bound to attract attention. That was one of the most supreme Dharma bodies in the Great Thousand Worlds. Even the top superpowers from all sides would be keeping a close eye on it. Even many Saint-grade beings were watching. Here, Nine Nether handed him a scroll from her jade hand. While you've been in seclusion, the Great Thousand Worlds have compiled a popular ranking for those vying for the eternal undying body. You should take a look and prepare yourself. Oh. Chen received the scroll with interest and unfurled it. The first name that appeared was one he recognized immediately. First place, Mo Ancient Clan, Moyu, late immortal grade peak. Younger brother of Mo Tian, leader of the Mo Ancient Clan. The next person with a chance to break through to Saint Grade. This guy. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. Moyu was indeed a formidable character. With his late immortal grade peak strength, unless he encountered a Saint Grade Heavenly Supreme, it was hard to imagine anyone who could defeat him. No wonder he was ranked first. Even Chen, if he hadn't reached the late spirit grade yet, would not dare to challenge Moyu head-on. Second place, Xun'er Spear Yi Qing, late immortal grade. Yi Qing. Chen's gaze hardened the moment he saw the name. Just a glance, and he felt an overwhelming aura of slaughter. Yi Qing is the second Hall Master of Western Abyss Hall. With his Xun'er Spear, he's unstoppable. It's said that he has experienced countless battles, honing himself through blood and fire. He's known as the Battlefield Xun'er and has a tremendous reputation. His power is not much weaker than Mohu's, Nine Nether commented. Chen nodded slightly and continued reading. Third place, Vidra King Shirluo, Chief Protector of Great Spirit Mountain, late immortal grade. Great Spirit Mountain was also one of the top forces in the Great Thousand Worlds. Cultivators from this mountain were known for their rugged and brutal physical strength. Shirluo, being the chief protector, was clearly no ordinary figure. Fourth place, Saber Saint Tuobat Song, late immortal grade. With his broken blade, he has swept through the world. He once made an enemy of a superpower and destroyed their entire sect with a single strike. These are not ordinary people, Chen remarked, his expression growing more serious as he pondered the rankings. Chen looked at the top four with a serious expression. It was only at this point that he truly realized how hidden the powerhouses were in the Great Thousand Worlds. Of the top four, he had only heard of Moyu, and had never met the other three. But who would have expected that their battle achievements were also so remarkable? To claim the eternal undying body amid such a gathering of heroes, even Chen felt some pressure. However, this did not make him feel the slightest bit of fear. On the contrary, there was a fiery intensity deep in his eyes, and his blood was boiling. The path of a peerless powerhouse was always about constant conquest, forcing oneself to evolve in life and death struggles against powerful foes. Chen sighed, then turned his gaze to the fifth place. When he saw the name, he couldn't help but pause, then chuckled lightly. Fifth place, Lord of Mu Mansion, Chen, mid-spirit grade, once caused a stir in the Futu Ancient Clan, defeated the Phoenix Clan prodigy Huang Xuanji in the Divine Transformation Pool, and single-handedly defeated the Ghost Emperor and 5 other immortal grade Heavenly Supremes in Tianluo continent. Feeling a bit down? You're only ranked 5th. Looks like, in the eyes of many, you're not as impressive as the top 4, Mandala said playfully, crossing her arms. Chen smiled nonchalantly and replied, the top 4 have been famous for many years, and they are genuine late immortal grade powerhouses. Naturally, compared to their fame, I can't measure up. He paused and then added, but if anyone wants to laugh in the end, they'll have to fight for it first. In Chen's eyes burned an unyielding fire. For all these years, he had been working toward the eternal undying body. So no matter how fierce the competition, it was absolutely impossible for him to admit defeat. Chen rolled up the scroll and stopped looking at it. Although there were a few more people behind him, in his view, the greatest threats in this eternal assembly were the top 4. I must prepare to set off now. Chen looked at Jiuyo and Mandala. With only 10 days left until the eternal assembly began, he had to leave immediately. If he didn't make it in time, it would be no joke. After all, Chen had waited too long for this day. Mu Manor is expanding rapidly now, so I'll have to trouble you both, Chen said. At this time, although various factions had surrendered, Tianluo continent had not yet been brought under Mu Manor's control. There would inevitably be many conflicts, so Jiuyo and Mandala had to stay behind to maintain order. Don't worry. When you return, I'll give you a Mu Manor that dominates Tianluo continent, Mandala said faintly, with strong confidence in her voice. After all, the biggest obstacle had been cleared by Chen himself, and Mandala was confident she could handle the rest of the integration tasks perfectly. Chen smiled, talked to the two women for a while, then stopped delaying. With a flash, he became a streak of spiritual light shooting into the sky, tearing through space, and vanished without a trace. Looking at Mu Chen's disappearing figure, Jiuyo's delicate face revealed a hint of worry. I wonder if Mu Chen will succeed this time. She clearly knew how much effort Mu Chen had poured into obtaining the eternal undying body. Mandala thought for a moment and said seriously, this will likely be the most difficult battle Mu Chen has ever faced. If he can overcome it, Saint Grade is within reach. As for how he will overcome it, that depends entirely on him. Jiuyo nodded slightly. She could only pray in her heart. After all, although Mu Chen's achievements were impressive, the top four were not simple figures. They were even more formidable than Huang Xuanji. As time passed, the Eternal Assembly continued to stir in the Great Thousand Worlds. Super powerful factions gathered in the Moat Ancient Clan. Some rumors had spread recently, saying that the Eternal Undying Body, which hadn't shown any signs of movement for countless years, had subtly begun to stir, as if it was about to choose a new master. This rumor spread quickly, attracting countless eyes. Could it be that the Eternal Undying Body, which had not selected a new master for thousands of years, was finally ready to choose one? And if the Eternal Undying Body really selected a new master, a peak powerhouse would likely emerge in the Great Thousand Worlds once again. Thus, under the influence of these rumors, the Moat Ancient Clan became the focal point of the Great Thousand Worlds during this period. And it was amidst this world-shaking focus that Mu Chen arrived at Mo Continent, where the Moat Ancient Clan was located, after 7 days. Maha Continent, also ranked among the supercontinents of the Great Thousand Worlds, is vast and boundless, rich in resources. This continent holds a reputation throughout the Great Thousand Worlds, its fame ringing out far and wide. Of course, much of this fame stems from the existence of the Moat Ancient Clan. As one of the 5 ancient clans of the Great Thousand Worlds, the Moat Ancient Clan has existed for countless years. Even in the ancient era, the Moat Ancient Clan was an incredibly powerful force. Today, after so much accumulation of power, it stands among the most formidable forces in the entire Great Thousand Worlds. In the past, when the boundless fire domain was rapidly growing within the Great Thousand Worlds, Mo Tian, the successor to the clan leader's position in the Moat Ancient Clan, attempted to annex the newly emerging boundless fire domain in order to establish his dominance and intimidate both internal and external forces. However, at that time, no one in the Moat Ancient Clan could have predicted that the Flame Emperor, who had come from the lower realms, would prove to be an unexpectedly formidable opponent. In the end, he shattered Mo Tian's ambitions, and not only did Mo Tian fail to annex the domain, but he was also left humiliated, which led to the rise and fame of the boundless fire domain. Although Mo Tian failed in his confrontation with the Flame Emperor, as the fame of the Flame Emperor continues to rise, potentially becoming one of the foremost figures in the entire Great Thousand Worlds. The former failure of Mo Tian has paradoxically become a testament to his own strength. While Mo Tian, with his prideful nature, would never care for such a notion, people from other parts of the Great Thousand Worlds would certainly see it that way. After all, the fact that Mo Tian could even engage in such a battle with the Flame Emperor speaks volumes about his strength and should not be underestimated. Thus, over the years, the fame of the Mo Ancient Clan has grown stronger, and it now ranks at the top among the 5 ancient clans. Whether in terms of heritage or the number of peak experts, it now stands far above the other 4 clans. Maha Continent, Eternal City. This city is not the main city of Maha Continent, yet it is even more famous than the Moat Ancient Clan itself. According to legend, it was constructed by the Immortal Emperor, and every time the Eternal Assembly is held, the event takes place here. Outside the Eternal City, atop a mountain peak, Mu Chen gazed distantly at the city, which exuded an ancient aura. At present, a steady stream of light and shadows was spreading across the city, creating a bustling and energetic atmosphere far greater than that of the Bloodline Tournament held by the Futu Ancient Clan. The Bloodline Tournament and the Eternal Assembly were fundamentally different in nature. The former was an invitation-only event for familiar superpowers, while the latter gathered more than half of the superpowers of the entire Great Thousand Worlds, whether familiar or not. After all, it concerned the possession of the eternal undying body. This truly is a gathering of heroes, Mu Chen murmured. Nearly everyone who came to the Eternal City was a top-tier expert from one of the great superpowers. Ordinary people would never dare to come and experience such overwhelming pressure. With a quiet sigh, Mu Chen moved, transforming into a streak of light that rushed toward the city. As he neared, he could feel a faint, ancient, an overwhelming fluctuation coming from the Eternal City. Although it was incredibly subtle, the energy caused a slight disturbance in his spiritual power, forcing him to slow his pace and land before the city's gates, wary not to overstep. This fluctuation. Chen furrowed his brow slightly. It was not the power of the Saint Grade, but something more mysterious. Could it be the remnants left by the Immortal Emperor? Chen thought to himself, making a guess. After all, only the lingering aura of the once greatest powerhouse of the Great Thousand Worlds could still evoke such reverence after so many millennia. With this thought in mind, Chen suppressed it and, out of respect for the Immortal Emperor, proceeded solemnly toward the city's gates. As he entered the city, his vision opened up to reveal the ancient stone-paved streets extending before him. The streets were crowded with people, each one emitting faint waves of powerful spiritual energy. Chen's arrival caught the attention of several individuals, and their gazes flickered with surprise as they recognized him. For a moment, Chen was taken aback, then smiled inwardly, feeling a small sense of pride. It seemed that without even realizing it, he had become somewhat of a celebrity in the Great Thousand Worlds, so much so that he could even be recognized here. However, these thoughts only briefly crossed Chen's mind as he stepped forward, heading straight for the city. After passing through several streets, he suddenly saw a dense crowd ahead, gathered together, with murmurs of conversation filling the air. His gaze followed the crowd. There, he saw a massive crystal wall on which flickered clear human figures. The Eternal Assembly betting ranking. Chen glanced at it, and then saw at the top of the crystal wall a shadowy figure of a man wearing black and white attire. His eyes were deep and intense, and even though it was just a projection, it exuded an overwhelming pressure that made one's heart race. Upon recognizing this familiar figure, Chen narrowed his eyes. It was none other than Mahayu. The crystal wall displayed that the total amount bet on Mahayu's victory had already reached 200 billion supreme spiritual liquid. Clearly, Mahayu was the most favored contestant in this Eternal Assembly. After all, in terms of strength, he was indeed unmatched, and being from the Mo ancient clan, he had practiced the Great Sun indestructible body and the immortal golden body since childhood. If the eternal undying body were to choose a master, Mahayu would have a very high chance of winning from any perspective. Below Mahayu, as expected, were Shura Spear Yiqing, Vidra King Shirluo, and Saber Saint Tuobatsong. Yiqing was a man with long, flowing hair, holding a blood-red spear in his hands. His gaze was indifferent, and it seemed as though it contained the essence of a world of slaughter. Just one glance made one feel an endless chill. Vidra King Shirluo was wearing a golden kasaya, his bald head gleaming like a star. His body appeared quite frail, completely unlike someone with terrifying physical strength. As for Tuobatsong, he wore a black robe and carried a broken blade on his back. His appearance was utterly ordinary, but his eyes, even when calm, seemed to contain a sharpness capable of slicing through the heavens. It made one's scalp tingle just looking at him. These four occupied the top spots on the betting ranking, with Mahayu leading by a wide margin, with 200 billion in bets. The other three were around 50 billion each. As expected, Chen's own figure also appeared below the top four, but compared to the betting amounts of the others, he was clearly not favored by many, with only a rather pitiful 10 billion. No wonder I was recognized so easily. Chen shook his head awkwardly. With such a large projection of himself here, it was no surprise that he was recognized as soon as he entered the city. Chen stared at the four powerful figures on the crystal wall, and then smiled faintly. So, these were his biggest opponents this time? He stepped forward, and below the crystal wall, beautiful maidservants were accepting the bets. They were clearly from the Mode ancient clan, as only they could set up such a large-scale betting operation here. Interested in a little gamble? A voice suddenly sounded beside Chen. He narrowed his eyes and turned his head to see a familiar figure smiling at him. It was Mahayu. As the overlord of the Mo continent, it was clear that as soon as Chen entered the city, his movements were immediately monitored by the Mo ancient clan. Chen looked at Mahayu, his expression playful. What's this? Are you already getting involved here? Doesn't the Mo ancient clan have more confidence than this? Mahayu shook his head. It's not a lack of confidence. I just don't want to cause unnecessary trouble. But don't worry, this is just an elimination measure. If you can't handle this small obstacle, then you're not qualified to participate in the Eternal Assembly. Chen raised an eyebrow and smiled coldly. The Eternal Assembly was set up by the Immortal Emperor. There's no such thing as an extra elimination round. Mahayu smiled faintly. The Mo ancient clan has safeguarded the eternal undying body for so many years. It has become a sacred artifact of our clan. For it, We'll do whatever it takes. Mu Chen shook his head. The immortal emperor is probably questioning his choice of our clan now. Maha, you didn't seem concerned. As long as our Mode ancient clan becomes the new master of the eternal undying body, even the immortal emperor won't be able to take it back. His eyes locked with Mu Chen's, and he slowly said, Mu Chen, if you can give up the competition for the eternal undying body, our Mode ancient clan will offer you sufficient compensation. This is not about a lack of confidence. I just want to make it clear to you that our Mode ancient clan will never allow anyone else to touch the eternal undying body. What do you say? Hearing Mo Hu's words, which were both soft and firm, a sharp gleam gathered in Mu Chen's pitch-black eyes. He didn't respond to Mo Hu. Instead, with a flick of his sleeve, the Qian Kuan bracelet fell before the beautiful maid under the crystal wall. 1 billion supreme spiritual liquid. I bet on my victory. Amidst the astonished gazes of many, Mu Chen didn't bother with Mo Hu anymore and turned to walk away. Mo Hu coldly watched Mu Chen's retreating figure, shaking his head and muttering to himself, if it weren't for your mother, I wouldn't be wasting so many words on you. Truly an arrogant fool who doesn't know his place. Since you're determined to court death, then I shall fulfill your wish.